Thanks, everyone. That was a little unexpected. Just want to make sure everything's up. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to the elders, past, present and future. In recent months, the team at Wattwatchers has had the privilege of working on a number of strategic projects, such as the Arena-sponsored My Energy Marketplace project, the Hayfield Community Microgrid feasibility study, which we co-led with UTS-ISF, and other projects with community groups, major research institutions, and regulated network businesses. While each of these projects is quite different in their scope and objective, two things are consistent. The first is that detailed and reliable energy data was critical to their success. And number two, traditional options for getting that data just aren't up to the task. These projects needed more than what regulated so-called smart metering projects infrastructure could provide, and getting access to the data that they need would traditionally be quite expensive and a logistical challenge, to say the least, if they had to set up their own infrastructure from scratch. So in 2017, Wattwatchers identified this as an emerging challenge and approached Arena with the idea of a People's Energy Data Bank to make it easier for stakeholders that could provide benefit back to the community from energy data to develop apps and services around it. This initial idea evolved into the My Energy Marketplace project, which is now coming to its completion, having installed smart energy solutions into 5,000 homes and small businesses, over 115 schools, and incorporating data from 1,500 non-Wattwatchers devices, including EV chargers. The MEM is a living example of the value that can be delivered from a data resource at a reasonable scale that supports a wide variety of stakeholders that need energy data. We heard a lot in the last talk for those that were here about the idea of VPPs, but there's a lot more than just the energy industry that can benefit from this data. And we're not talking about the typical energy sector perspectives. There are a growing number of use cases, especially when we consider net zero applications. And this is something that I've done more of a deep dive on in previous presentations, including the talk I did here last year. We jumped into that in a lot more detail. Just one example though for today, and that's banks. A bank's Scope 3 emissions include those of its home loan customers, and thus energy data provides an important input to reporting of emissions for these institutions. In the energy sector, technology often takes centre stage in our thinking and planning, and this might be true for many folks when they think about the key phrase in this title's talk, a market for energy data. These words might conjure the image of a technology-driven marketplace like the VPPs we heard about in previous talks that provide a big button for the market operator or retailers to press to manage a whole bunch of what we call distributed energy resources. Providers of the supporting services would get paid for that, and maybe the end customer, the owners of the assets, would get a cut as well. And we heard from Powwow that some of them are actually getting good money from that. Now, some may question this vision, but let's assume for a moment that's where we're heading. It seems that a lot of the regulations and work that's being done towards this goal. Our experience tells us that there are actually three key areas that need to be addressed for a successful marketplace, and not all of them are technology related. So I've got a lot to pour out today, so let's just jump straight into the first one, data collection. When thinking about collection, the first thing that we need to consider has absolutely nothing to do with technology. It's a more fundamental question that needs to be answered. What value are we providing to the end customer? Because if we want them to share their data and to provide access to their assets, they need to be on board. And importantly, we need our messaging to be super simple and focused on them, what they get out of it. And while we might be thinking that the bottom line is the end goal, it's only part of it. Savings is not the only part of the value proposition. We've found that supporting a clean energy future is still a very strong message for people. Energy independence is still a very strong message. So this kind of engagement might occur through apps. It might be technology. It might be through other services where they get some kind of value in exchange. A green loan, for example, reduced rates. It might be financial or other incentives, the carrot approach in demand-side participation. For some projects, like our work in Hayfield and with our network business partners, this engagement might go a lot deeper with more in-depth community engagement and research programs. But that's just step one. Once they've engaged, we have to get their permission. the legal authority to access their assets, share their data, and in some cases control their devices. At Wattwatchers, we hold strongly to the view that the customer owns their data and access to their devices, but we've found in practice that the law makes this virtually impossible. Still, we must strive to meet this intent in what we ask our customers sign up for, the ubiquitous terms and conditions. And once we have their permission, we need to get something into a premises to collect the data and provide the control we're after. And again, I hate to keep going back to the previous talk, but we heard about how the Power team have had to develop their own technology to achieve that. We also provide something similar. While some inverter battery and EV chargers might have the smarts built in, a lot of them don't. And so we have to install an additional device, which, as all of you will know, is sometimes a hard proposition for the customer. So if we can do this where a Spark is already on site, installing solar, installing an air conditioner, an EV charger, or a hot water system, we can greatly reduce the upfront cost. There are, of course, ongoing costs too. Devices of this nature need to operate in the field for 10 years or more. So we have to consider ongoing maintenance and management of communications, among other things in our operations. As you can see, it's getting more complex and we're just at the first step. And if we're relying on this data and control, we need to be confident that everything is installed and configured correctly. This includes the metadata associated with the device, the things that it's connected to, the context in which it's installed. And this upfront work is crucial to get clean data at the back end of the process. As they say, garbage in, garbage out. And getting all of this right can be harder than it may first appear. Perhaps it doesn't appear that easy after all. It requires vigilance to QA installations and incentives and supporting services to make it super easy for customers and installers to be able to provide the additional information we need. And finally, we get to the actual technology. The first question here is, what are you wanting to do and collect? In addition to basic energy measurements, the projects that we've been involved in required things like power quality, frequency or voltage, multiple circuits, imports, exports, generation, on-site usage, individual loads, 5-minute data, 30-second data, 5-second data, in real time. Some needed on-device control capabilities. Has anyone seen a smart meter do that lately? So of course our existing infrastructure just isn't supporting these needs. And last but absolutely not least, the device itself needs to be secure. And that includes limiting what can happen if somebody does get into the device and can do things with it. How do we limit that a compromised device? There's a whole bunch of stuff to go in here, too much to go into, but it's clearly a critical part of the puzzle. So to recap, when we think about collection, it's more than the tech. We need to consider engagement with the end customer, the legal foundations, the terms and conditions, installation, logistics and quality assurance, maintenance and cost management, our technology choice, and the security of that technology. And that brings us to Pillar 2. Actually, not quite yet. Now we come to Pillar 2. Pillar 2 is all about connectivity, which is getting data from the devices that we have in the premises to the servers and the systems that we use to manage things. Supporting truly smart devices that have reflexes that respond to their environment and provide high-frequency data and rapid response capability, all of this has a corresponding impact on the communications technology we use, especially in relation to costs, which is one of the reasons why a lot of trials and vendors have attempted to use on-premises internet as a principal communications channel for their energy monitoring and control devices. However, this has proven to be neither a robust nor reliable approach. And so we have an example from the real world here, a recent report from AEMO examining the efficacy of CER control in an incident in South Australia. It notes that piggybacking on the customer's internet connection showed a wide diversity of response rates. All of the response rates below 50% are ones that relied on customer internet connections. The upshot is that we need a more reliable communications channel than just the home's internet, and at present, cellular wins. However, if we use common tech industry standards designed for high bandwidth environments, which a lot of systems do, that can significantly blow out communications cost over cellular networks. So we have to be creative and diligent with how we manage the connectivity we use. Security is, of course, also crucial for connectivity. I'm talking a lot about security, and you might be thinking, well, how real is the risk? I mean, really? Well, I think this recent example from Guam demonstrates that the risk is both real and present. Time doesn't allow me to go into the detail of this case study today, but I'd suggest looking it up. Australia was involved in detecting an espionage activity from China against Guam infrastructure. So what does this mean for controllable CER in Australia? It could be argued that the risk is reasonably low right now, but when we consider that control is being mandated in jurisdictions across the country over the next 18 months or so, and we're talking in the realm of 350,000 new solar systems each year, that's 1 million devices in 3 years if current trends continue. So this will become more and more critical. And that's not to mention things like EV charging, and they've been in the news recently as well as being susceptible to cyber attack. So this security risk is being recognised by regulators, and the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act clearly demonstrates how the government is responding. The Act places obligations on specific entities in, and I'll count these off, electricity, communications, data storage, processing, financial services, and financial markets. Every single one of those things we're talking about here today when we talk about energy markets. And that's not the full list, by the way, but it's a big deal for our industry. These are all components of what we're talking about here today. And at the moment, CER is not a focus under the SOCI lens, but we are talking to agencies that are already considering how their DER footprint falls under this regulation and what they need to do about it. So again, a quick recap on some of the things we need to consider when we think about connectivity. There's cost paired with reliability. We can't rely on the premises internet alone, so we need efficient ways to deliver timely data and functionality securely. And that brings us to pillar number 3, sharing, which is what we do once we receive the data at our infrastructure and how that gets stored and moved around. Privacy is, of course, critical. We must be diligent not to misuse data or to allow data recipients, the people that we share data with, to abuse the privilege that we've been granted, the permissions that we've been given by the end customer. At the MEMS inception, the My Energy Marketplace project's inception, data privacy had hit the headlines thanks to Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, and consumers were super wary of misuse of their data. In the years since, this has become a mainstream concern, something that we are reminded of at every product announcement event from Apple or Google, if ever you've seen one. So we need to go above and beyond to protect, encourage, and enforce our customers' privacy in our offerings. And of course, when we think about sharing, security again makes an appearance. Now you might be thinking privacy, security, aren't they the same? Not quite, but they're clearly related. Here I use the term security to describe the underlying IT systems where we store the data from devices and that exert control over those devices, things like VPP management systems. Now the Guam example and the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act highlight how important this is, but I think we all have recognised that the recent Medibank, Optus, Latitude and other mainstream data disclosures that we've witnessed here in Australia just really ram home this point. Many of the devices we're talking about here are produced by overseas companies. It's not always clear where the infrastructure supporting their products is located and where the data might go nor control may be exerted from. Many folks are now demanding that all data and systems be hosted onshore, and we anticipate that this demand will grow over time. What we've also found is that this idea of data sharing beyond its source of origin can come into conflict with the requirements of regulations. For example, a regulated network business is required to own the data that they collect. So how does this play out with the idea of a customer-owned asset? Or when a third party like Wattwatchers, my company, are considered the principal data controller under other regulation like the GDPR, which is EU-focused, but we've got similar things here in Australia. So it's a challenge to navigate that territory. And the last thing that I wanted to touch on in relation to sharing is we need to avoid such a massive mountain for developers and integrators to climb that the benefit of sharing is lost. And I don't want to take potshots here. We're a big fan of this actual particular initiative, but there's some drawbacks here. As an example, word on the street is that it costs between $500,000 and $1 million to fully integrate into the consumer data right for energy ecosystem. And we, as I say, we support initiatives like that, but that's just simply too high a cost for startups, innovators, researchers and others, certainly the ones that we're dealing with, They're folks that can provide real benefits to the community and customers through access to energy data, but they just don't have $1 million lying around to participate in those kinds of systems. And so lastly, just to recap on that, sharing of energy data is vital if we're to achieve our societal goals of net zero, grid management and customer empowerment. Security is paramount, but we must resist the temptation to put sharing in the too hard basket and just lock everything away. Upholding privacy and appropriate use is crucial for maintaining customer trust and our license to operate. And the barriers to integration and access must not be raised too high as to thwart those who are best placed to provide value from the data. And so there you have it, all three of the pillars. That was a whirlwind. Thank you for sticking with us. Collection, connectivity, and sharing. So if that's some of the things that we've learnt we need to be doing, what has Wattwatchers been actually doing in the projects that I mentioned earlier? I'm going to focus a lot on the MyEnergy Marketplace today, and it supports engagement primarily through the MyEnergy smartphone application, that technology mediated engagement. It's compatible with iOS and Android and available for free for all MEM participants. It provides all of the core features you'd expect from a home energy management system, including energy tracking, budgeting, tariff comparisons, and more. But the Wattwatchers team is also becoming more and more versed in community engagement models, and the extensive consultation with Hayfield is a prime example of that as well, going offline and doing things in the real world. The MyEnergy Marketplace project also supported the legal foundations by putting a lot of effort at the start of the project to develop consumer-friendly terms and conditions that balance the end consumer's rights and the ability for us as an organisation to use that data in ways that are in keeping with the customer's wishes. And that includes a strong ethos of opt-in permissions. The only blanket permission we have is for de-identified and aggregated data. Anything else, the customer has to provide active, informed consent. And we've successfully navigated how to achieve this with a regulated network business, which is no mean feat and something that I'm super proud of our team for having been able to achieve. The MEM also solves for access. We've developed an OAuth-like mechanism that enables the end user to quickly and simply enable a third party with access to their energy data via the MyEnergy app. Doing things this way means that integrators can access MEM data in a matter of hours, securely and with customer permission at a very low cost, thanks to our cost stack sharing model, which demonstrates how sharing can not only provide those other benefits, but reduce and amortize costs across multiple stakeholders. And that affects both the upfront costs that I spoke about earlier and those ongoing costs. So this model is something that we've developed and applied in the MEM project with a number of partners and will be extending into the future. And it significantly reduces the barriers to accessing energy data significantly for innovators and researchers. And on to hardware. Our soon-to-be launched 6MW product enhances security for both the device and connectivity. It provides both cellular and Wi-Fi, so a little bit of a best of both worlds communications channels, and will integrate with Modbus through RS485 and TCP. I'm throwing a lot of acronyms at you. For those in the audience that are technical, you'll appreciate why. And provide circuit-level switching capabilities, so all in a compact package. These are all of the foundation stones that we've identified to create a secure and robust communications channel for consumer energy resources. And importantly, we're not just talking about Wattwatchers devices, or our own devices. This includes inverters, EV chargers, and more being able to utilize that communications channel securely. I should also note, because we've been talking a lot about data ownership, that Wattwatchers is Australian owned and our products proudly wear the Made in Australia mark. So, talk about a whirlwind, 15 minutes for all of that. Thank you again, and for choosing to be with us here today, particularly over lunch. I'm looking forward to chatting with you in the Q&A, and if you'd like to connect online, scan the QR code that hopefully will come back up, and it's got my LinkedIn and contact details there. Thanks very much.